What else? Trauma wound, we can see pressure ulcer, of course. So what is wound? It is a break in the skin or mucous membrane. Okay, any break in the skin or mucous membrane, it is wound. So what is skin tear? Usually we are seeing skin tear if there is friction. Okay, if there's friction between the linens or between the linens and the patient's skin. So it is a break or rip in the outer layer of the skin. So what is the outer layer of the skin? It is the epidermis. So next, what are the causes of wound? So we have the abrasion, we have the contusion, the incision, and laceration. We have also the penetrating wound, the puncture wound, the ulcer. So what are those? So what is abrasion? Abrasion, it is a partial thickness wound caused by a scraping away or rubbing of the skin. So for example, if you have if you had car accident, okay, and then if you have a abrasion because it your skin is rubbed or scraped, so it is called abrasion. So usually it is only superficial, and you can uh, treat it by not covering it but allowing it to dry in an open air. Next is contusion. Another cause of wound is contusion. So contusion, it is a closed wound caused by a blow to a body or a bruise. Okay, if you know what is bruise, that is a contusion. Next is incision. Okay, incision, it is a cut produced surgically by a sharp instrument. It's created an opening into an organ or body space. Usually, you will see an incision if there is a surgery. Okay, for example, you had operation like appendectomy, you will have a surgical incision. Okay, if you will notice incision, it has a smooth what do you call this, smooth wound compared to laceration. Okay, laceration, you will sometimes misinterchange incision and laceration, but the difference is you see incision, it has a pattern, it is smooth, the wound is smooth, while laceration, okay, it is an open wound with torn tissues and jagged edges. Okay, jagged edges means there is no measurement. Okay, it has no pattern, so that is laceration. So that is the difference between incision and laceration. Incision, it has a pattern, for example, linear pattern, while laceration, sometimes it is linear but it is jagged, the edges is jagged. Next cause of wound is penetrating wound. Penetrating wound, it is an open wound that breaks the skin and enters the body area, organ, or cavity. For example, if there's a knife, if there's a nail, if there's a metal, that is called penetrating wound. So what is the difference between penetrating wound and punctured wound? These two has similarities. First, their similarities, one of their similarity is they have the point of entry. For example, a knife is being stabbed on the patient's chest. Okay, so there the point of entry is on the chest. The difference is penetrating and the puncture wound. Puncture wound, it will not have an exit point, but the penetrating wound, there is an exit point. So for example, there is a stab wound, the entry point is the chest, and then the exit point is on the back. So that is penetrating. Puncture wound, it is not so deep, so that is puncture wound. It will not have an exit point. So ulcer. Ulcer, it is a shallow or deep crater-like sore of the skin or mucous membrane. So we have different kinds of ulcer. We have pressure ulcer, we have arterious ulcer, venous ulcer. We have a lot of ulcers, but the most common one is the pressure ulcer. Okay, so pressure ulcer, it is usually seen in a patient which is bedridden. those patient who is not turned regularly, those patient who has what's this? Uh, compromised circulatory function. So those are the patients who are having ulcers. So we have different types of wound. We have intentional wound. We have unintentional wound. Okay, what do we mean by intentional wound? Intentional wound, this is a wound intended or created for therapy. So someone did it because they have intention to for therapy. They did it because they have reason, like surgical incision. So for example, if you created a wound in the abdomen because there is appendicitis, of course, it's for therapy. You need to remove the appendix so the patient will survive. So for your information, appendicitis is an emergency condition. So you need to treat it as soon as possible, because if the appendix will burst, it will cause peritonitis, and this peritonitis will be a cause of sepsis because it will be a toxin in our body. So one example of intentional wound is your surgical incision. Next is unintentional wound. So those wounds created accidentally, like trauma. Okay, so if you have an accident, that is called unintentional wound. It can be open and closed wounds. Okay, so another types of wound is open wound. Okay, if the skin is open, that is called an open wound. It can be intentional, and most is unintentional wounds, like in trauma. Next type is your closed wound. Closed wound, these are the tissues and injuries, but the skin is not broken. It can happen, guys. It can happen like in bruises, twisting, and sprains. These are the examples of closed wounds. Next type is clean wound. Okay, those wound which is not infected. Those wound which has no infection, pus, or any microorganisms. So these are clean wounds. Next is clean contaminated wound. Clean contaminated wound, how it will happen? Clean and then contaminated. So this is how it happens. Occurs when the surgical entry of reproductive, urinary, respiratory, or GI system. For example, if your doctor operated you for uh, a procedure like appendicitis, the wound is clean, but the doctor did not apply an appropriate sterile technique. So what happened to the clean wound? It will be contaminated. So in that case, it will be clean contaminated wound. Next. What is contaminated wound? Of course, contaminated wound has a high risk of infection. Unintentional wounds are usually contaminated. For example, you had trauma, you have accidents, okay? Open wound. So it will be contaminated because we don't know what came inside, because it's trauma and it's accident. Then occurs from breaks in surgical asepsis, spillage of intestinal contents, and trauma. Next is infected wound or dirty wound. Usually you'll find infected wound for patients who is having diabetic ulcer or diabetic foot disease. Okay, those patients who have diabetic foot disease, these are the patients, diabetic patients. Okay, you will smell the foot, uh, foul smell of the foot because it's really infected. So it's because of the sugar there, the microorganisms will come into the wound and it will eat the wound until it will become infected. So example of this, another examples of infected wound are old wounds, surgical incisions into infected areas, and trauma that ruptures the bowel. Next is chronic wound. Chronic wound does not heal easily. So this is example of chronic wound, pressure ulcers, circulatory ulcers, and so on. Next is partial thickness wound. If we're talking about partial thickness wound, if you remember the three layers of the skin, the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis or subcutaneous tissue. If we're talking about partial thickness wound, what is affected is only epidermis and dermis. Okay? While full thickness wound, the affected part is dermis, the epidermis, and the subcutaneous tissue. In short, all of the layers of the skin is affected because of this wound. Muscle and bone may be involved. So what are the complications of wound healing? So first, hemorrhage. Okay, hemorrhage, it is an excessive loss of blood in a short time. So if you are having especially an open wound and if it keeps on bleeding, okay, especially big wound in the legs, what else, in the chest, like stab wound, okay, you will have a loss of blood and it is called hemorrhage. Excessive loss of blood is called hemorrhage. Okay, and if this hemorrhage, okay, will not stop, okay, what will happen, you will have a shock. Okay, what do you mean by shock? It is a results when tissues and organs do not get enough blood. Okay, what you will do if your patient is having shock, what is your first aid? Your first aid is to elevate into two pillows the legs, okay, or anything that you can put just to elevate the legs. Okay, it will be, you need to elevate it higher than the heart, so the blood will go back to the heart. So that is the first aid for shock. In hemorrhage, what is your first aid? Okay, if you are having an excessive loss of blood, okay, or a bleeding, what you will do, if it's small bleeding, you put a pressure, you put a clean cloth. If you don't have gauze, you put a clean cloth or anything clean, clean cloth, you put it there, press, okay, until it will stop bleeding. If you are having a big bleeding, okay, or a big wound, what you need to do is you put a clean cloth, you tie it with a tourniquet or a big rubber band. Okay, you tie it so it will stop bleeding. Next is dehiscence. Dehiscence, it is a separation of the wound layer. What do we mean by dehiscence? Dehiscence is like, for example, if you are having surgery, okay, and it opens, okay, because you are exerting too much force or because you cough or whatsoever, it opens, it is called dehiscence. Okay, what is evisceration? Dehiscence is an opening or separation of the wound layers. While evisceration, what happened? It the skin also separated, but what complicates it is the abdominal organs protruded. Okay, it came out from the wound. That is called evisceration. Okay, and this is an emergency condition. So next complication of wound healing is infection. Of course, most of the wound, because usually it is open, what the usual or the most common complication is infection. That's why the most of the physician or the surgeon, they will give antibiotics pre-operative and antibiotics post-operative just to minimize the infection. Next is wound drainage. Okay, in the hospital, guys, you will see a lot of wound drainage. What is wound drainage? What is the drain, the color of drain? What type of drain? It is watery, it is bloody, so that is wound drainage. So we have different types of wound drainage. We have a serous drainage. Usually, if you're talking about serous drainage, it is the color of the fluid is clear and watery fluid. So if you're having any surgery, okay, for example, a trauma surgery or an abdominal surgery, they will put you a drain. Okay, it's like a drain. So the excessive blood came from the wound, it will comes out. Okay, so at the first 1 to 3 days, most of the time, the drain is color red because it is usual, or it is common, because the patient just operated. So you will see the drain will be not clear. It's not clear but bloody. But after three more than 3 days, after more than 3 days, and still the drain is color red, okay, especially it is bright red, it means that there is something wrong inside. So you need to report it to your nursing in charge, nurse in charge. So let's go back. So usually serous drainage, the color of serous drainage is clear and watery fluid. If we're talking about sanguinous drainage means bloody drainage. So these are the drainage or drain you are usually seeing for patients immediate post-op. Okay, so 1 to 3 days or 1 to 2 days, approximately 1 to 3 days, the drain is color red. Okay, it is bloody. Serosanguinous drainage, it is a combination of water and blood. So most of the time, it's the color of the blood, or the drain, it is light already because of the combination of water and the blood. Next is purulent drainage. If we talk about purulent, it means with pus, okay? With the first two letters PU, pus, okay? Purulent drainage means there is a thick green, yellow, or brown drainage, okay? So you will notice the drain is having a pus green color or yellow or brown color. So it means there is infection. So we have different types of drain. So we have different types of drain. You'll see in the hospital, guys. You have Jackson-Pratt drain. You have the Hemovac drain. You have the pigtail drain, the Penrose drain, the T-tube drain, the chest tube drain, nasogastric tube, urinary catheter, negative pressure wound therapy. So you need to familiarize yourself, especially if you will be working in the hospital. Okay, so you will be familiar. You will know. Oh, this is Jackson Pratt. Oh, this is pigtail drain. This is T tube drain. This is chest tube drain. So we should know that. That's why I'll show you. So this type of drain, this is called Jackson Pratt. Jackson Pratt drain. Okay, next, this is Hemovac drain. So Jackson Pratt, sorry, let's go with Jackson Pratt. So Jackson Pratt drain, as you notice that it is not what do you call this? It has a negative suction. Okay, it is with suction. If this drain has no suction, it means it's not working. So if it is like this on the left side, okay, no suction, it means that it is not doing its function. It needs to suction, it needs to have suction, so it will suction the excess blood. Next, this is Hemovac drain, okay? Hemovac drain, this is usually emptied, sorry, usually this Jackson Pratt and Hemovac drain, it is emptied every shift, okay? And then you need to record it every shift in your INO, or intake and output. So this Hemovac drain, it needs to have suction also. Okay, you will notice on the right side, it has no suction. It is big. But on the left side, you will see that it is with suction. That's why it's small. So it means that it is working. So if you notice that this two drains has no suction, you need to report it to the nursing in charge. Okay, Next, this is pigtail. Sorry, this is pigtail drain. So your pigtail drain, it is a drain which can be put on the abdomen, okay, which can be put in your patient's abdomen, okay. So usually you want to drain something from the wound, like for example, if you have an open appendectomy because of the appendicitis, okay, you need to drain the excess blood or any pus there. So the doctor is putting a pigtail drain. So this is for abdominal wounds. So this is called Penrose drain. Okay, as you notice, this is Penrose drain. Penrose drain, it's like it is a, see, it is like a straw which is put in the skin. Okay, it is sutured in the skin. So the drain will comes out in the drain, this Penrose drain. Okay, excess blood. Next, this is ICD or the T tube. Okay, or chest tube. Chest tube, most of the time, the one who's handling the chest tube is the nurses because it is complicated. Okay, so you will see the chest tube, it is connected on the lateral aspect of the chest. If your patient have air like pneumothorax, hemothorax, or pneumohemothorax, it means that the patient lungs has air and blood inside. Okay, so they are putting chest tube just to remove the air and the blood. Okay, so the lungs will re-expand again. So this is called vacuum seal, okay? Or this is called vacuum seal or negative pressure wound therapy. Negative pressure wound therapy. Sorry. Okay. Usually we are putting this, you will see if there is a wound, okay? And the wound is not good, okay? The doctor will refer the patient into a wound care team. Okay, wound care team will put a back seal for the patient. Why? So the wound of the patient will be moist and then it will close slowly by slowly. So this is how the negative pressure will help in the wound. So it will help the wound to close and it will be moist and it will be closed slowly. So this is negative pressure. Okay, so you will see here on the monitor, okay, you will manipulate it if what is the doctor's order, if it's what is the pressure. Okay, most of the time they will put 125 mmHg. It is continuous pressure or intermittent pressure. Most of the time they are putting uh, continuous. Okay, so this is negative pressure. So next is, let's go with ulcers. Okay, ulcers, it is a shallow, it can be a shallow or a deep crater like sore of the skin or a mucous membrane. Okay, so what is gangrene? Gangrene, this is a condition in which there is a depth of tissue. If you are if you encountered a diabetic patient, okay, and you will see the leg of that patient and it's dark or black, it is a gangrene, okay, which means that the tissue died already. Okay, so they need to cut it. That's why those diabetic patients need to be amputated. So we have different types of ulcers. We have the circulatory ulcers, we have the diabetic foot ulcers, and we have the pressure ulcers. Circulatory ulcers, we have the venous ulcers and arterial ulcers. Next, what are the risk factors of ulcers? First is the advanced age. Of course, the skin of the patient, of the elderly patient, it's already thin. it's already fragile. So ulcers can develop easily. Then poor nutrition and hydration. If your patient is not eating enough protein, enough vitamin C, and hydration, of course, you will be having, he is prone for ulcers. Moisture. If your patient is having always moist skin, like always the patient is having wet diapers, okay? You're not changing the diapers of the patient. The skin is always moist. The skin is always wet. What will happen? It will increase the moisture. The microorganism will come to there until it will be a pressure ulcer. Microorganisms and respiratory problems. Okay, if your patient have poor cardiovascular, what do you mean by that? If your patient is having like in ulcers, in the venous ulcers, the circulatory supply is not good, insufficient. Okay, so that part of the body is not receiving an enough blood. So what will happen? It will be prone for pressure ulcers. Okay, then friction and shearing injuries. If your patient is always having a friction and shearing injuries, okay, so what will happen? The patient is prone for ulcers. Okay, guys, so let's go with pressure ulcer. So our pressure ulcer have different stages. So we can stage them as stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, and unstageable. Okay, so let's go with the picture so you will understand fully. So stage 1, on the left upper side, this is stage 1, pressure ulcer. As you will notice that stage 1, what is affected only is the epidermis, the first layer of the skin. That's why it's first. The first layer of the skin is only affected, which is the epidermis. As you notice that the epidermis has a redness. So redness, it is already a stage 1 pressure ulcer. Okay, next, on the right side, upper right side corner, this is called stage 2 pressure ulcer. What is affected, guys, is the epidermis and including the second layer of the skin, which is the dermis. Okay, so epidermis and the dermis. Next, on the left lower, this is called the stage 3. As you notice, this is not infection. The yellow that you are seeing, this is fats. So it includes the third layer of the skin, which is the epidermis, the dermis, and the subcutaneous tissue. Next, at the middle of the bottom part, okay, so this is called the stage 4 pressure ulcer. Stage 4, it includes the 3 layers of the skin plus the muscles and the bones. So if you're doing a wound care in this patient, it's very difficult and it will take a long time because it is deep. Okay, and you need to have you need to do it strict sterile technique, because if it will be infected, it will be operated. Okay, so please be careful. Lastly, this is unstageable. What do we mean by unstageable? We cannot identify it as stage 1 or stage 1 to 4. So if it's like this, like blackish in color, it is called unstageable. Okay, guys, we have a lot of pressure sites in our body. Okay, that's why we are turning the patient every 2 hours or regularly, just to prevent the pressure sites. Okay, to prevent, just to not put pressure on these sites. So see, when your patient is lying supine, so the pressure sites is on the back of the head, shoulder, spine, shoulders, lower spine, the tailbone, the heel. When your patient is in prone position, there is a cheek and ear, the jaw, elbow, breastbone, genitalia, knee, leg, and toes. Your patient is lying lateral, shoulder, ribs, hip, iliac, trochanter, knee, ankle, and inside and outside of the ankle. What are the complications of pressure ulcers? Infection, osteomyelitis, and pain. Osteomyelitis is the infection of the bones, okay? Bones, including muscles. So, what is your role, nursing assistant, in preventing pressure ulcers? So first, we need to avoid allowing a person to remain in one position. So you need to turn the patient regularly, strictly every 2 hours, especially if the patient is bedridden. Okay, so to prevent the pressure ulcer, turn your patient every 2 hours. Next, use your observation skills. For example, if you are giving bath to your patient, you can see all over the skin of the patient. So use your assessment skill, your observation skill. Check every corners of the skin of the patient if there is developing ulcer, okay, like redness, irritation. And then if you notice that, you need to report it to the nursing in charge so she can treat it or inform it to the doctor. Then provide a good skin care. What do you mean by good skin care? If your patient skin is dry, okay, you need to put a moisturizer. Okay, if your patient's skin is always wet with diaper, you need to put something like a antibiotic powder. Okay, not a talc powder because it's not used in the hospital. What used in the hospital, it is the chlorhexidine powder. So it is with antibiotic. So it will treat the it will kill the microorganisms when your patient is always incontinent. Next, good perineal care. So you always check every 2 hours you are turning the patient. So you will check also the diaper of the patient if the patient is diaper is wet. So you need to check it also. Anticipate toileting needs. Okay, if your patient is incontinent, expect that every 1 hour or 2 hours the patient will pee or will poo. So you need to check every now and then. Encourage mobility. Okay, this is the best way to prevent pressure ulcer. Why? Because if you are mobilizing, you are improving your blood circulation. If you're mobilizing, you're preventing yourself or the patient to put pressure on the sites. I saw you before. I showed you before the pressure sites. And if you are mobilizing, you will prevent other complications like respiratory complications, renal complications. So you need to encourage your patient to mobilize, okay, as tolerated if he can. But if your patient is dizzy, of course, you cannot encourage him to mobilize, okay? Let him sit for a while. And if he tolerated sitting, then slowly by slowly standing. If it's tolerated for 15 minutes, then you can proceed to walking. Then minimize skin injury caused by friction or shearing. Okay. Then encourage good nutrition and hydration. Most of the time, those patients with pressure ulcer, they are referred to nutritionist or dietitian. So they will help you to provide good nutrition, and what they are doing is they will give more protein, more vitamin C, so the wound will heal easily. Then use pressure reducing devices. What are those? We are using air mattress, okay, or egg crate. So to prevent the pressure sites, okay, to give more pressure on those pressure sites. So what is dressings? Okay, so we are now entering into the wound care. So dressings, it is a piece of material used to cover and protect the wound. I don't have picture. Anyways, I'll show it to you, the different types of dressings we are using in the hospital. So what are the purposes of dressings? To protect the wound from injury and microbes, to absorb the drainage. So remove dead tissue, promote comfort, cover unsightly wounds, provide moist environment for wound healing, apply pressure to control bleeding. So usually dressing is the one cover which we are putting in the to protect the wound. So we have different types of dressing. We have a gauze, okay? We have a gauze. It comes in a square, rectangle, pads, or rolls. Gauze dressings absorb drainage and moisture, okay? We have also non-adherent dressings. This is a gauze dressing, which is non-stick surface. It does not stick to the wound. It removes easily without injuring the tissue. We have also the transparent one to allow air to reach the wound, except fluids and microbes. So you can put the transparent adhesive dressings, films. If your patient is taking bath, it will not get wet. Next is dry dressing. Dry gauze dressing is applied over the wound. Wet to damp dressing used to remove dead tissue from the wound. And wet to wet dressing, gauze dressings are saturated with solution. Usually, like Inadine dressing and Fusidine dressing, it is with medication. So, applying dry wound dressing, dry non-sterile dressing. So, bandages, purposes. So, we will do this application of dry non-sterile dressing in our face-to-face class. Okay, we'll have hands-on of it. Purposes of bandages provide support and reduce swelling from injuries. We use to hold dressings in place, applying pressure control, bleeding. So the bandages we are using, these are the bandages if, for example, if you have sprain, if you have wound, we are putting the bandage. That's why it will reduce swelling from injuries like sprains. It will use to hold dressings. For example, if you have wound and you want to hold it, the dressing, so you put the bandage. And if you have bleeding, you need to you will put bandage just to apply the pressure to control the bleeding. So what are the guidelines we need to do when we are doing bandaging? First, use the correct size, length, and width. Position the person in a good alignment. Face the person during the procedure. Start at the lower part of the extremity. Work upward to the top part. Expose fingers or toes if possible. You need to expose the fingers and toes so you will check the capillary refill if it's not impeded or if it's not uh, affected by too much or tight bandaging. Apply the bandage with firm, even pressure. Check the color and temperature of the extremity every hour. But because if you're putting or applying bandage, okay, tightly, what will happen? The color of the extremity, okay, the affected extremity, it will be dark. Okay, it will be bluish or purple. So it means that it is tight. So you need to loosen it. Then reapply and loose or wrinkled bandage. Replace a moist or soiled bandage. If the bandage is with blood already, you need to replace it. What is binders? Okay, for example, if you had cesarean section, the doctor will tell you just to buy binder. So the binder, it is an elastic fabric you are putting in an abdominal region. Okay, so it will promote healing because they will support the wounds. So if you will cough, the wound will not be open and hold the dressing in place. It will prevent or reduce swelling, promote comfort, and prevent injury. So, application of elastic stockings. So we are also applying elastic stockings. If you notice, some of the elderly, they are having elastic stockings, not the uh, stockings that we are using in our work, but this is a medical one, which means it will serve as an anti-embolic or anti-embolism. So it will prevent clots in our body. So this is called elastic stockings. Okay, so in elastic stockings, you need to consider the size, okay, because there are sizes for each patient. And what else? It will exert pressure on the veins, okay? So if it doesn't exert pressure on the veins, it's not doing its function. So Size is very important. Promotes venous blood return to the heart. It helps also to prevent blood clots in the leg veins. That's why if you're traveling for a long time, for example, if you're going to Philippines, 9 hours travel, okay, you need to put an anti-embolic or anti-elastic stockings to prevent this clots. Because if you're sitting for a long time, okay, so what happened, you have a high risk of clots, especially if you are 50s or middle age already. So you need to apply this one. So persons at risk for thrombi who use elastic stocking. So who are those patients who usually use this stockings? Patients with heart and circulatory disorders, patients on bed rest, had surgery, older, and pregnant. Okay, so guidelines in using elastic stockings, as I've told you, you should have a correct size. You should check circulation, skin color, and skin temperature. So this is our wound care topic. So I hope everyone understand it. And if you have question, just raise it in our WhatsApp group. So next topic is activity. So bye-bye.